I would like to pose a question. Do you know who wrote this? It is, in fact, nothing short of a miracle that the modern methods of education have not yet entirely strangled the holy curiosity of inquiry. For this delicate plant, aside from stimulation, stands mainly in need of freedom. Any guesses as to who wrote that? Not quite. That was Albert Einstein. The man who uncovered the theory of relativity, among many other things. A man who has illuminated society with his exploration of the world. But maybe he wouldn't have, had he not learned the power of inquiry. What is the power of inquiry, you may be wondering? That's a good question. And if it or a similar one popped into your mind, then you are already using that power. Because the power of inquiry is the capacity to influence the world that each of us possesses when we ask questions. Albert Einstein recognized this power. However, not only was he too afraid to ask questions in class, but also his teachers discouraged it. And so, at the age of 15, he quit school. Why did he do this, you might ask? Well, he realized that only when he was freed from the constrictive walls of the classroom would he truly be able to learn. When you were a student, did you ever want to ask a question in class but not ask it? Were you worried that others would think you didn't understand the material? Were you unsure of how to put your question into words? Did you think your question wasn't good enough? Were you hesitant to slow down the lesson? Or were you nervous to speak up, so you decided it would be better not to? It's happened to me, and my guess is that it's happened to you. At my high school, 93% of students have wanted to ask a question in class, but not asked it. 74% of us don't ask because we think it'll make us look stupid. 58% of us don't think our questions are relevant. 54% of us don't ask because we're too afraid. But did you know that by not asking your question, you are not only doing a disservice to yourself, but also to society? Research shows that when we are empowered to inquire at a young age, we grow up to become free thinkers, to question authority, to challenge corruption, to ask how we can make the world a better place. Both historically and today, people have made room for oppression, injustice, and suffering by failing to inquire, by failing to question the doctrines of their government, society, and culture. In the antebellum United States, women and men fueled the fires of misogyny by embracing without question the belief that a woman's place was in her home and a woman's duty was to her husband. During the Holocaust, most Eastern Europeans didn't question Hitler's pseudoscientific ideologies, enabling him to commit with little protest the genocide of those not deemed members of the Aryan race. Today, many Americans don't question President Trump's claim that Mexicans are rapists and drug dealers. Because historically, the act of accepting ideologies without question has led to brainwashing, passivity, injustice, and even genocide, it is dangerous not to ask questions. According to a study at the Tenney School, a private school in Houston, Texas, most Western students don't ask questions in class because they don't want to look stupid, similar to the students at my high school. They don't think their questions are good enough, or they're hesitant to slow down a lesson. One of my friends affirmed this when she told me that when she is reluctant to inquire in class, it's often because she thinks what she has to say isn't valid. Another student says he spends so much time formulating his questions that by the time he's ready to ask them, the discussion has moved on. The desire to form the perfect query actually stops him from asking it. 2 classmates told me they're reluctant to slow down a lesson by pausing to inquire, When Western culture emphasizes gulping down as much information as possible without stopping to question it further, without stopping to investigate it further. One story stuck with me. A local high schooler said his English teacher encourages students to engage with the ideas presented before them and challenge an author's assumptions. Yet, when that same teacher's students challenge his own assumptions, he sometimes tells them their viewpoints are wrong. Now, this is not the first time I've heard a story like this. Quite a few of my friends have had teachers who declare their opinions to be fact by deeming others to be incorrect. And their students have been hesitant to offer a different perspective. It's disappointing because the inability to inquire translates into students' real lives when they go out into the world without essential inquiry skills. But I don't think teachers are to blame. I think this is more to blame. Research shows that race, gender, religion, and other identities all affect students' comfort level in asking questions. One of my family friends who grew up in the 70s said she learned that children should be seen and not heard at home before she learned it in the classroom. Today, most Western teachers want their students to ask questions, but their curriculum requirements pressure them to press on into new material. Sometimes there just isn't enough time to answer questions, especially ones that require deep thinking. The urge to teach students all the information they'll need to ace their SATs and get into college controls the classroom and leaves little room for inquiry. Educators who don't have to answer to the Common Core or the College Board have found it easier to encourage questioning. But those who don't control the pace and format of their class can't always do that. And so, their students stop asking questions. They lose their curiosity. They see ideas as doctrine rather than opinion. They're less likely to question an educational system that frowns upon inquiry in the first place. They're less likely to question any injustice. It's a vicious cycle, because when it comes to injustice in society, if a person doesn't have the necessary tools to question systems of oppression, they end up upholding them. Naomi Shulman, the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, recalls that nice people made the best Nazis. My mom grew up next to them, she says. They got along, refused to make waves, looked the other way when things got ugly, and focused on happier things than politics. They were lovely people who turned their heads as their neighbors were dragged away. You know who weren't nice people? The resistors. I think she has it right. Her non-Jewish neighbors might have been perfectly courteous individuals, but many of them believed that inquiry was risky, that being nice meant not questioning the order of society. And that included a society which threw children into gas chambers and performed medical experiments on the elderly, a society which burned my people alive and starved them to death. As fewer and fewer people in Nazi Germany challenged Hitler's regime, the harder it became for anyone to question it. It was the resistors, on the other hand, who asked questions. It was the resistors who noticed their neighbors forced to board the train to Auschwitz and were brave enough to ask where they were going. Shortly before the American women's rights movement, many Americans had come to the conclusion that women were empty vessels, capable only of obeying their husbands without question. They learned to listen to others' thoughts rather than their own, to trust their husbands blindly, to believe that curiosity was not only detrimental to their well-being, and not only undesirable in a woman, but also detrimental to their well-being. But then, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, among others, realized that inquiry wasn't actually a threat to themselves, but really a threat to male authority. And so, they started asking as many questions as possible. They challenged society's limited role for women. They questioned assumptions about what a woman was capable of. They wondered how the world would change for the better when women were free to be strong. Their questions sparked a movement. By 1920, most women were voting in America. By 1983, they were going to space. By 2016, they were running for president. In the 1950s, many Americans thought that segregation was wrong, but were too afraid to question it. Others were convinced it was just the way the world worked. Their imaginations were too small to envision equality. But then Rosa Parks wondered what would happen if she refused to move to the back of the bus. Her inquiry was revolutionary. By 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King had dreamed of a better world by asking how it would change when his 4 little children were not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. In 1965, the Civil Rights Act was passed. In 1992, Dr. Mae Jemison became the first Black woman astronaut. In 2008, Barack Obama was elected president. The next time you hesitate to ask a question, I want you to remember what Mara Lee Adams, founder of the Inquiry Institute, says. Questioning is a basic tool for rebellion, just like how I'm questioning why my microphone is coming off. We'll answer that later. It breaks open the stagnant, hardened shells of the present, revealing ambiguity and opening up fresh options to be explored. It can uncover hidden power and stifle dreams inside of you. It can change institutions and entire cultures. It encourages people to create strategies for change. Now, it might appear that we are victims of a society that disallows inquiry. But each of us is a part of society. We are the ones who define it. And we are the ones who can redefine it. The only way to change our current culture of not asking questions is to start asking them. When, as a result of learning to ask questions, our global society no longer accepts its doctrines as the way things are, but instead is geared toward wanting to learn more, our planet will be a more just, free, and equitable place. Because in order to change the world, we must first question its current state. So, what can you do? Ask questions. Learn how to ask them. Encourage your friends, your family, your parents, your children, your students, your teachers to realize the power of inquiry that we all possess. It takes courage, I know, but it's necessary. Let's make a promise to each other right now to do it together. When we learn the power of inquiry and choose to use it, we can dismantle oppression. We can promote justice, encourage free thought. We can make the world a better place. But don't just take my word for it. Ask the world what you can do for it. When you do, I think you'll find that just asking is revolutionary. And next time you're reluctant to inquire, ask yourself this: how will my question change the world? Thank you.